Good afternoon. My name is Sheila Lamb, and I'm with the Virginia SBDC Network. For those of you that are not familiar with our organization, the Virginia Small Business Development Center is a partnership program between the U.S. Small Business Administration, George Mason University, and local host institutions throughout Virginia. With 26 locations across the Commonwealth, we provide training and technical assistance to small businesses in their local communities. Our one-on-one advising services are available at no charge. Today's webinar, Patent Basics, is presented by the Virginia SBDC Network in collaboration with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. Be sure to check out the next webinar in this series, Trademark Basics, and the date and registration will be coming soon for that one. We are recording today's presentation, and it will be posted on our website, virginiasbdc.org. Due to the large number of participants, everyone's microphone is muted. But if you have questions during the presentation, you can type those into the Q&A box. We have also enabled the live transcript function, which you can show or hide via your own meeting controls. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our presenter for today's session, Albert Wong. Albert is a primary examiner at the United States Patent and Trademark Office, examining applications in telemetry and computer input devices. He has been with the USPTO since 1994 and has worked in the Office of Innovation Development, educating independent inventors on the filing of patent applications. Prior to joining the office, Albert was a design engineer at Teradyne. Albert has a Bachelor of Science degree in Electrical Engineering and a Juris Doctor degree from the University of California, Davis. Please join me in welcoming Albert Wong.
Welcome. Copies of the slides will be presented after the presentation, so there isn't any need to take some notes. There are some very important information, including some links in the slides. If you need to contact me in the future for some questions, my email address is albert.wong@uspto.gov. With me are my colleagues Tong and Anna. They will be monitoring the Q&A, so if you have any questions, you can type them into the Q&A. And there'll be some time after the presentation to actually ask some questions. Word from our legal department: the content is for informational purposes only and is not considered legal advice. The reason for that is everyone's situation is a little bit different, and oftentimes in the law, a small change of facts can result in some different outcomes. So it's important that if you have some specific situations, you contact legal counsel. The other issue is people's situations change over time, and only your personal attorney can provide you with constant advice should your situation change. The basic objective of this course is to provide you with an overview of patents. This is for someone that is first exposed to patents, or you might have a little bit of knowledge, but you may not be sure about all the details. It's not intended to be a comprehensive course. It's more introductory to get you familiar with terminology, some basics, like the contents of a patent application, something what we call the enablement requirement, which is the amount of details that must be in an application to make it a valid application. We'll also talk a little bit about claims, which are a very important part of your application because they are the things that provide you with the scope of protection. It should be noted that while the claims can be modified during the prosecution, they can only be modified based on what you have in disclosure. So if you've left something out in the disclosure, you cannot add that into the application or the claims after filing. So it's important that at the time of filing, that your application be complete and thorough. So if you have any doubts, in general, it's better to have more information than less because anything you omit cannot be added. So what is a patent? Well, a patent is a property right that's granted by the United States government to an inventor. That means that the rights exist only in the United States. And you must be the inventor. So you have to be the person that came up with the invention. the right is an exclusionary right. A lot of people mistake a patent as a right to make something, but it really is a right to exclude other people from making it. So if everyone else is excluded and you're the only one that is not excluded because you're the inventor, then you do have the exclusive right to make what's in the patent. And the reason for that is that oftentimes inventions are comprised of things that are other inventions for someone else. And so since your invention may include other inventions, other people may exclude you from practicing part of your invention. So if there are parts of your invention that is protected by patents from another inventor, even though you have a United States patent, you may be precluded from making your invention. The other thing of notice is a patent is only valid for a limited time. So after a period of time, generally 20 years from the time of filing, a patent expires, and what's in the patent will be available to the public to freely practice without the paying of any fees. The other thing that's important is that a patent is basically a bargain, where in exchange for the public disclosure, which means you tell the public your invention, you get the exclusive right to prevent other people from practicing your invention. There are three types of patents: utility, design, and plant. I generally call them chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry. The plant patents are pretty rare. If you're ever in the grocery store and you see that new variety of apple, or you're in the nursery and there's a new variety of orchid or flower, it's generally protected by a plant patent. The other patent that is a little bit uncommon, but it's going to be more common, is the design patent. It's basically covers the ornamental looks of something. Recently, we issued our 1 millionth design patent, so it's becoming more popular. In general, design patents are a little easier to obtain because all you really have to do is illustrate and show your invention in a detailed drawing. However, the scope of protection will generally be limited to the ornamental aspects of your design, which provide you with significantly less protection than the utility application, which is generally the most common type of patent and what we think about as a patent. A utility patent covers any new, useful process, machine, article manufacture, or composition of matter, or any new and useful improvement thereof. So an improvement to an existing invention, if it's significant, can be the subject of a new utility patent application. One of the things, this is a very important point. When one is filing a utility application, there are basically two flavors. There's something called a provisional, which is what we call an informal application. It's not something that's examined, but what it does is it's a placeholder. So let's say you have an invention that you really want to have some sort of protection with, but you don't necessarily have the money to hire an attorney. If your application is relatively simple, you can essentially provide the details and illustrations of your invention, along with a very pretty basic filing form and a filing fee, and you mail it into the patent office, and that holds your place in line for 1 year. So you have 1 year to file your non-provisional, which is the formal application. So in that year's time, you could figure out the filing process or obtain the assistance of an attorney. In the meantime, you will have kept your place in line. When you're filing for a utility application, the first person that files gets the patent. So being first is a very important thing. If you don't file a non-provisional within that year, the provisional expires and you essentially lose your place in line. The non-provisional application, which is a formal application, are examined. It requires claims, and it's generally published 18 months from the earliest filing date, unless you request non-publication. In general, if you're a small inventor and you're not filing outside the United States, it's good to request non-publication because your application will be kept secret unless it becomes a patent. The non-provisional application will be examined by an examiner like myself, and if you fulfill all the requirements for a patent, it will be granted. The first part of a utility application is the title. It's pretty basic. It's just like what you have in a book. It should be short and specific in terms of describing the invention. There's no really specific requirement except that it describes your invention. You should avoid generic language and something that's pretty simple and basic. It generally works really well. The other requirement in a utility application is a specification. This is the written description of your invention. It must provide sufficient details to inform others to make and use your invention. So before you file, it's probably a good idea to show it to someone you trust and ask them, without me providing you any additional details, do you think you can make this invention based on what I've written here? The specification should be clear, full, concise, and use exact terms. The presumption is that someone reading your patent application has some skill and knowledge in the field. So they're not necessarily a layperson that knows nothing about the field. So, for example, if your invention is a bicycle, you can presume that you don't necessarily have to provide details on welding and attaching parts to tubing or even painting. These are things that are presumed to be kind of known in that general field. In your specification, you should provide at least one specific embodiment. There could be different ways of doing your invention, in which case you can show more than one embodiment. And if you show more than one embodiment, you'll get more protection potentially. But you must include at least one embodiment. And it must conclude with at least one claim. And I'll get into that a little later because that's a little bit detailed, but the claims are a very important part of a utility application. These are some basic requirements. Your specification, abstract, and claim should be double-spaced, single column, written one side in portrait only, and have a bit of a margin. It's also a good practice for each page to be numbered consecutively, generally on the bottom of each page. That way, someone can ascertain whether a page is missing or maybe the pages got put out of order. So by numbering the pages consecutively, we can easily determine if something is missing or out of order. The other is that you use a nondescript font. So don't use those color decorative fonts. Just use regular fonts in 12-point size because that makes it easy to read. So what does the specification involve? Well, it's got some parts. As mentioned earlier, it's got a title, and it's got some sections called the background, the brief summary, a description of drawing, and the detailed description of invention. And I'll go into each of these parts in a little bit more detail. There's also the claims, and there's also an abstract, which is about one paragraph and is usually put on a separate sheet of paper with the title abstract on top to make people aware that that is the abstract. Now, when you look at patent applications, you might see that there's a lot of other sections like cross-reference related applications or statements regarding federally sponsored research. These sections are not required. They may be necessary in certain situations. For example, if you're filing what we call a continuation or a divisional application, or you're claiming priority to a provisional application, you might have a paragraph that refers to these other applications. And that is to allow the patent examiner like myself to be aware of other applications that are pending before the office, or if you have a provisional application that would entitle you to an earlier priority date. So let's start with the background of the invention. This is kind of a way to introduce to the examiner what the invention is in a high-level form. Later on in the specification, you'll go into the invention in more detail. This is a way to kind of inform the examiner of what's inventive and why your invention is different enough to merit a patent. So the first part is generally the field of the invention. So let's say your invention is a bicycle. Someone looking at the application may see a lot of different parts of a bicycle and may wonder whether the invention is the wheels, maybe the tire. But if you describe in the field of invention that your invention is a mobile transportation device, as shown as a bicycle, then the examiner will be aware of what is inventive. This is followed by a description of related art. This is essentially a description of what existed before your invention. So what's related, what things that are similar to an invention, and what's been done before. This is also a good area to describe what the problem you're trying to solve, and what other inventions are out there that are similar to your invention. This is usually followed by a brief summary of the invention. Again, this describes your invention at a high level. It describes the problem you're solving, and it describes what makes your invention special and different. These two sections are really kind of important. The background of the invention essentially tells the examiner what's been done before. The brief summary of the invention describes the invention and how it's different. So this is a way to communicate to the examiner what's inventive. It allows the examiner to understand your invention better, which leads to a higher probability that your patent will be granted. Now, usually most inventions include a set of drawings because pictures are a really good way of illustrating your invention, particularly if they're different parts. But even if your invention is a method, you can use things like flow diagrams and other illustrations that help people to understand your invention. Oftentimes, when you have multiple drawings, there can be a bit of confusion as to what the drawings show. So in the specification, we ask you to provide essentially one sentence for each drawing so that the examiner can understand what's shown, because oftentimes it's clear in your mind, but for an examiner looking at an invention for the first time, they may be confused as to what's shown in the different figure drawings. For example, again, using the bicycle as an example, the first drawing may be an overview of the bicycle, or maybe a view from the front side, and another drawing maybe show a backside, and other drawings may zoom in on specific portions of the bicycle to illustrate them in clear detail. Because if you put everything into one drawing, it's going to be very confusing, and oftentimes your drawing will be very cluttered. The description of the drawing is followed by the big portion of the specification. This is a very important part of the application. This is where you provide the details as to how to make and use your invention. You can refer to the drawings, and oftentimes that is the way you do that. You might talk about what figure 1 shows and all the parts of the figures that make up your invention. Usually the figures will have reference numbers that refer to the different parts. And when you're talking about the invention, you should refer to the different parts with a specific term and the number that's shown on the drawing. That way, the examiner, when he reads the application, can relate the written part of your application to your drawings. For more information, this is a section of the MPP that can tell you a little bit about how to write the detailed description of the invention. The detailed description should provide clear support for all terms in the claims. So when you're referring to the parts of your invention, it's important to be careful in terms of using terms that are clear and descriptive. And it's important to use the same term for the same parts throughout the application. Oftentimes, people who don't write a lot of applications, they may change the term when they are writing the specification. And so they might, for example, let's say you're talking about a key on a keyboard, and they might refer to a keycap, a button, and they really mean the same thing. But when you're writing a patent application, different terms mean different things. It's presumed to be different. So be careful in picking terms and be clear. Sometimes it could be helpful to draft your claims first. That way, it helps you select the terminology. But there's no real right or wrong way of doing an application. It's whatever works for you. And oftentimes it takes multiple revisions. So this is not something that the first draft is usually going to be the best. So it's often a good practice to write a first draft, think about it some more, and make revisions to your drawings as well as to the written portion of your application. So some good specification do's. Describe the invention clearly to allow a person of skill in the art to make and use the invention without undue experimentation. When referring to drawings, make sure each reference numeral is used for only one part of the drawing. If there are multiple parts that are similar, you can use the same reference number. For example, in a keyboard, you have multiple keys. If the keys are kind of generic, you can use the same number for each key. But if there's a specific key with a specific function, you should give it a specific reference number. You should provide at least one specific embodiment that is the best known way of making your invention. And make sure that there's a brief description of the drawings. So for each drawing, include at least one sentence describing each drawing in the section called Brief Description of Drawing. You should provide antecedent basis for all terms in the claims. What does that mean? For each and every term you use in the claims, you should have a similar term in the written specification. That way, when someone is interpreting your claims, they can refer back to the specification and understand what you're talking about. And oftentimes, these same terms refer to portions in your drawing. And finally, focus on the technical feature of the invention. Oftentimes, what is very important in an invention is the structure, not the function of what it does, but the parts that make up your invention and how the parts are put together. Some things to be cautious of. Try not to use trademark terms. For example, instead of using loop Velcro, you might use a generic term hook and loop fastener. The background of the invention does not require you to state how you came up with the invention. It's not intended to be a marketing document, and how you came up with the invention is not relevant to the examiner whether he's going to grant you a patent or not. You can come up with an inventive concept through a variety of ways. Again, avoid marketing language and focus on the technical aspects of how to make and use your invention. And don't forget to proofread your specification to look for grammatical errors. Certain grammatical errors can be corrected, but other things, if you omit something or you call something by a wrong term, that may oftentimes not be permitted as a change after an application is filed. So Let's talk a little about the claims, which are the most important part of a utility application. I will note that if you're filing a provisional, you don't need to include the claims. But when you file the formal application, the non-provisional, that's where you must include at least one claim. The claim defines the invention and what aspects are legally enforceable. It must conform to the invention as set forth in the remainder of the specification, and the terms and phrases used in the claim must be found in the written portion of the application. As far as format, again, it's just like the specification, double-spaced on separate sheet of paper with the title or the heading claim at the top. So we understand that these sheets of paper refer to the claims and not the other portion of the specification. Each claim is written as a single sentence. So it must begin with a capital letter and a period. Oftentimes this sentence is quite long and a little bit awkward, but that's just the way claims are written. With each application, you are allocated 3 independent claims and 20 total claims. If you require more additional claims, you can pay an excess fee to enter more claims. But in general, most applications will be perfectly fine with 3 independent claims and total claims. This is the maximum number. You do not have to have 3 independent claims. The invention is basically pretty simple. Oftentimes, 1 independent claim and just a few dependent claims will be sufficient. Each claim must be numbered consecutively in ascending order. So that's to distinguish each claim individually. And during prosecution, if you were to add claims or change claims, you must retain your original numbering. So once again, to recap, a non-provisional application must contain at least 1 claim. A claim may be written in independent or dependent form. In general, a dependent claim is the broadest version of your invention. It does not refer to any other claim and is intended to stand alone. A dependent claim is a claim that refers to another claim. And it's often a way of shorthand writing a claim that incorporates all of the subject matter of the independent claim. So what's important? Well, when you write a claim, it can be a very broad claim, which provides you with a lot of protection. But in general, broad claims are very difficult to get a patent on. On the other hand, you could write a claim that's very specific, but it may not be very valuable because it may be very easy to design around your application. So in general, you want to kind of shoot for something that's in the middle. It's like Goldilocks, not too hot, not too cold. So claims should be not too general and not too specific. So this is an example of a claim, and this is an example of a claim that's a little bit too broad, okay? So let's say your invention is this vehicle that's a convertible, and you've written the claim as a vehicle comprising. This is what that means is it's made up of the following parts: a frame, a first and second front wheel, a first and second rear wheel aligned and spaced behind the first and second front wheel. So it shows the 4 wheels and where they are placed. A seat connected to the frame, a removable top portion made of cloth, wherein each wheel rotates and is connected to the frame. So you basically described in a single sentence the parts of your invention, as shown by the yellow convertible car, and how the parts are connected together. Why is this claim too broad? Well, take a look at this stagecoach. You'll find that if you take this claim and we compare it with every word, it matches up with this stagecoach, even though it's not intended. It does have a frame, it does have front and rear wheels that are aligned. It does have a seat here, and it has a removable top. And the wheels rotate and is connected to the frame. So even though you did not intend to recite a stagecoach, but reciting a claim that's very broad, you've essentially recited something that's not new. And so since it's not new, a patent will not be granted on this claim. So what do you do when you're in that situation? Well, you can amend, all right? So you're going to add some details to your claim. Anything that is in the specification at the time of filing can be added to the claim. Now, when you add some details, it makes the claim narrower. So you're giving up some sort of protection in an effort to distinguish your invention for something that already exists. Now, you can add a variety of things, but the important thing that you must have at least one item that is different. Now, you can have multiple items that is different, but each additional item reduces the scope of your coverage. So in this case, the applicant decided to add a motor, a yellow frame, a plurality of hinged doors, 2 glass windows, 2 red lights, 2 metal bumpers, and the wheel is made of rubber. So all of these things make it different than the stagecoach because the stagecoach does not have a motor. Now, I should note that just that alone would be able to distinguish over the prior art, which is the stagecoach. But in this case, the applicant really wanted to be sure, so he added a lot of additional details, which may or may not be necessary. Now, one should be careful when you're adding details because if the details are very specific, it reduces the protection. So in this case, by reciting a yellow frame, someone could literally make the same invention with an orange frame. So it may not be the best idea to add something that specific unless it really is a defining part of your invention. So before you write a claim, you'd ask yourself a few questions. What is the invention? What are the pieces and parts that make up your invention? And how do the pieces and parts relate to each other? Do you have more than one invention? For example, oftentimes you might disclose an apparatus or a machine, but there's oftentimes a unique method of making or using this apparatus or machine. And so you can have claims that relate to the apparatus, and you could have separate claims for reciting a method of making or even a method of using your invention. And you should ask yourself, are there multiple versions of each invention? Sometimes a broad claim can cover more than one version. Other times, you'll need separate claims for each version. You should think strategically. What are you hoping to accomplish? What is the broadest valid claim that you think you can get? You should think about variety in the scope of your claims. Some claims may be broader, some claims may be narrower. So, but for presenting a variety of claims, you'll increase your scope of protection as well as make it more likely that you'll get broader protection. Oftentimes, it's good to think about what it is you're trying to protect. What is the critical aspects that make your invention unique? It gives it some function that is not available in existing items. And that is the area that you really should focus on. And it's also the area you should think about how to obtain the broadest protection. And then you have to ask yourself, are there how likely are the claims to be patentable? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to file a patent claim that's so broad that you can think about something that's similar. The other thing to think about strategically is how many claims do you need? If you require excessive claims, there is a charge of $96 per independent claim and $20 for dependent claims beyond the 20. It's noted that these costs are micro-entity, and I'll explain that a little later. I'm going to recap a little bit about the claims. Again, a claim is written as a single sentence. It generally has a preamble. In the case of, I've shown you, that is a vehicle comprising, a vehicle, that's the preamble, and it's usually followed by this term called comprising. What that means is that it's made up of the following parts. It's a very magical term because generally most patent claims use either comprising or consisting of. Comprising means that your invention is not limited to just the elements that are recited in the claim. If you use the other term, consisting of, is what we call closed language. It means that your invention is only protected for the items that are specifically listed in the claim. The reason comprising is more commonly used is that it protects you in case someone decides to add something to your invention. For example, let's say your invention is a bicycle. If someone were to add like a bell or a headlight to it, even though it would be different than your claim, because the claim does not recite a bell and a headlight, the comprising language would cover those situations because it's considered open-ended. You can add any element you want to the claim, and it would still infringe the claim. So you would be protected from someone that takes your claim, your invention, and adds something or modifies something just by using the comprising language. And it's followed by the body, which recites the elements that make up your invention. So yeah, I'm just going to recap this really quickly. The most common language is comprising or comprises, and it's considered open-ended. It encompasses all of the listed elements in your claim, but may include additional elements that are not listed. If you're using the term consisting of, it's closed-ended. Generally consisting of is more for things like chemical compounds, things of that nature, where if you add something additional, it's not going to work. So you want only that set of things listed in the claim. So some good practices in writing claims, you should particularly point out and distinctly claim the subject matter that is inventive. Consider drafting the claims first. Review both the additions and corrections to the claim term whenever you write a claim to make sure that every term in the claim is also found in the written portion of the specification. You may also look at claims and patents in the same field of technology. So before filing a patent application, oftentimes people do a patent search to see what's out there. You can take a look at those patents and see how those claims are written, and oftentimes, use some of the same terminology and some of the same format as kind of a guidance and a template for you to write your application. Make sure each term in the claim is found also in the written specification. This is what we refer to as each term having a proper antecedent basis. And also think about the scope of protection. What are the critical elements of your claim that are essential to your invention? Those things should be found in your claims. Something to be cautious of. Don't write claims covering two statutory classes. For example, if you have a device, that's your invention, and then there's a method of making the device, those are two separate classes, and you should have separate claims to each one. So a claim shouldn't refer to the parts of a device as well as the method steps of putting together the device. Other things to be concerned about, use the terms consistently. So if you're referring to some part of your invention, and you're referring to that same part later on, use the same term. Don't change the term. Don't write multiple sentences. A claim should be only one sentence. Do not refer back to only a portion of another claim. So if you have a dependent claim that's referring to an earlier claim, that refers to the entire claim, not just a portion of the claim. And do not replace elements from another claim within a dependent claim. So if you have a dependent claim, don't change the elements and call them different things or use different terminology. The set of claims should be very consistent. I'm going to talk a little bit about the abstract. If you've ever published a paper, you'll know what an abstract is. In general, it's just a one paragraph that's about 150 words or less, double-spaced. And it's just a brief description of the invention. The purpose of it is when someone is reading through a lot of patents, you don't really want to go through and read a long patent and only to figure out that it's really not relevant. So oftentimes you can look at the abstract and say, well, is it something that is relevant to what I'm searching for or not? So that that one paragraph allows someone to quickly grasp the concept of your invention. I'm going to refer a little bit to the drawings. A drawing is necessary if it's required to understand your invention. It cannot be added after the filing date. In almost all cases, patent applications have at least one drawing. And drawings must show every feature of the invention that's claimed. So if your claims talk about various parts, in general, your drawing should show each of those parts that you have in the claims. You can provide as many views as necessary. There are no really limits in terms of drawings, except for the fact that they must be black and white. Color drawings are only permitted in design applications or under very special circumstances where color is a necessity. When you're filing your drawings, make sure that the lines and the numbers are dark, and you should make sure that there are no blotches or extraneous marks. What happens a lot is that someone may photocopy a drawing before they file it, and oftentimes when you photocopy, there might be some blotches and marks in it. If that is the case, make sure you have a drawing that doesn't have anything that is not related to the invention. Use reference characters, generally usually the numbers, to denote the parts of your invention. And these same numbers will also be used in the specification when you're talking about these drawings. Each figure should be labeled. In general, we talk about them as Fig 1, Fig 2, Fig 3. If there's subparts, oftentimes there might be like a figure 1A and 1B. And it's generally a good practice to avoid using descriptive words in the figures. This is another really kind of important aspect to be aware of. We have something at the Patent Office called an Inventor Assistance Center. This is a department that's manned by examiners like myself who are experienced in the examination process. We can answer general questions concerning patents, examination policy and procedure, but we can't give you legal advice. We can't tell you how to write a claim, but we may be able to look at a claim and say, well, you know what, this claim is got some problems. It's not written as a single sentence. The numbering is improper. So if there's formatting issues or structural type issues, or if you have trouble filling out forms and filing, this is a good contact information to get some help for filing your application. And this is a list of a lot of links that you will find useful. The one I really want to point out is this micro entity limit, okay? This is a form that you can fill out if you fulfill the requirements. The advantage of filling out this form is that your filing fees are reduced significantly just by filling out this form. The two requirements are that your income must be less than 3 times the national average. So it changes every year. And you have to file 4 or fewer applications. So if you're like most people starting out, it's probably your first or second application, and your income is probably less than the microentity limit. It's a little bit over 200,000. If you fulfill both of those requirements, fill out this application, whether you're filing a provisional or non-provisional application. And in general, your filing fees will be reduced by, I think, about 70%. So it's a really significant reduction just by filling out a form. There's no documentation required. It's an honor system. Like anything before the patent office, you want to be correct and truthful, because if it's later found that you were inaccurate, you may lose your patent rights. There's also a link here for a law school clinic that might provide you with some assistance also. And that concludes my presentation, and I'm available to answer any questions you might have.
Thanks, Albert. That was
Yes.
very informative. I think we do have a couple questions that have not been answered yet.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to start with one. It's a multi-part question. I'll read through it, and if you need me to go back and break it down, I will. When in the product development process, do inventors submit patent applications then or when ready for manufacture? How does one balance the need for protection with the possibility of revision?
Okay. One way of doing it is to file a provisional as early in the process as possible. In general, when your invention is complete, that is the time to think about filing an application. The thing that you should keep in mind is that before you disclose the invention to the public, you should always think about filing that patent application, because once your invention is disclosed to the public, it starts a clock. There's a 1-year limit that after you've marketed or demonstrated your invention or even published a paper to the public, after 1 year, you're not allowed to, you won't get a patent. It's considered in the public domain. So that's a very important thing to consider. Oftentimes, you might find better ways in the revisions of doing things as things go along. So what happens a lot is that additional applications are filed later on. If at the time of manufacture, you decided that, oh, you know what, my initial invention is better made a different way, and I really want to protect that way. So you can file a new application with additional details if your invention changes later on in the process. But in general, you should file when your application is complete and you're looking at protection. One other thing to be kind of aware of before filing any application, be aware that this is a bargain. This is a disclosure in exchange for protection. For some inventions, if you don't think that they can be easily reverse engineered, you might just want to keep it secret. For example, if you're Google and you have a great algorithm for search, you may not want to patent it. You may be better off just keeping it secret.
The Next question is, can you help format the claims?
I'm not sure what this question referred to, but in general, yeah, we can kind of, help you arrange the portions of the claim to make it readable, to make it more understandable. But we can't tell you what to include and what to exclude. So
Okay.
if you want to help someone to give you a little bit of information as to how to format the claims better, I think we can certainly give you some help in that respect.
I understand an algorithm can be patented in the USA, but not, for example, in Europe. How do you suggest to tackle that?
I really can't comment on that. I don't know how the Europeans handle stuff. There are certain things that certain countries will not protect. For example, I think business methods, which is usually something that is not protected in Europe outside the US. So for countries that decide that it's not good policy to protect certain items, you just are not able to get protection for those items.
Let's see. I currently have a patent and just received the notice of allowance. I wanted to know, should I file for a patent in different countries? Oh, I think that one might have just, oh, okay, sorry. Anna's answering, I think, while I'm asking. So let's see. I'll start over. I currently have a patent and just received the notice of allowance. I wanted to know, should I file for a patent in different countries now before my 1 year since I filed is up in December?
Patent.
And if you want me to read that over, I will.
Yeah. Well, if if you filed the application in the United States within 1 year, you can file in the foreign countries. If you wait until after that year, you may be probably precluded from filing in foreign countries. So in general, you should file in foreign countries as soon as possible. Particularly if you have a patent granted in the United States. But in general, a lot of times people will file applications before a patent is granted in the United States, because oftentimes it can take a while for a patent to be granted, and that year deadline may be over before that time.
A follow-up to that is, do I need a lawyer to file in other countries?
In general, yes. Most countries are not as friendly to pro se inventors outside the United States.
There was a question earlier about algorithm. It says, furthermore, can we claim the usage of the algorithm in multiple domains?
Yes. For example, if you have an artificial intelligence algorithm and is usable in different fields, you can refer to those different fields. But be aware that for each field in which your algorithm you're seeking protection on, you should provide some detail in terms of how it's used in that particular field. So what would not be a good idea is just to disclose the algorithm and say, well, here's a laundry list of different fields you can use it in, without any details of how that algorithm may be adapted or used in those particular fields.
Do we have any other questions while we have Albert's mind to pick here? We are coming up on our hour, but we've got about 5 more minutes. So if anyone has anything they'd like to drop into the Q&A, you can go ahead and do that now, or I'll just get us wrapped up here. Give you guys a moment. And if you can take a moment to fill out the questionnaire that's up on the screen, that helps us for the future. We appreciate it. Okay, so this is for that last question. So those domains should be discussed, but can be included.
Yes, in general, they can be included.
In the same application.
Yeah, in the same
Okay.
application. Yeah, in general, with any application, include as much detail as possible. I mean, you can file these things in separate applications, but you always want to retain your place in line as being as early as possible. So if you file an application on day one, and then you file another application on day, let's say 5 months later, that second application, your place in line is a lot, later in time. And some things can happen in between. But oftentimes there's this balance, all right? Do you continue adding to an application in the hopes of making it more perfect? Well, yeah, but you know what? You're risking that someone can jump ahead of you. So oftentimes, getting your application in as early as possible is good, because you can oftentimes file additional applications without any downside, except you might have to pay a little bit extra in terms of fees.
And do you know how much it costs to file overseas?
I don't know specifically, but I can generally give you a ballpark figure that the filing fees are in the thousands. So it's expensive.
Mm.
And that's in addition to the attorney handling your application. In general, a lot of times, a U.S. application can be filed overseas without, a lot of modifications.
Let's see. So the best is to first have the placeholder and then transform it to the proper application, or transfer it to the proper application.
In general, it's not 100%, but in general, yes, because of the fact that there's really not a lot of downside to filing that provisional. It's fairly easy, and it's inexpensive. Let's put it that way. In a lot of corporations, they will file a provisional that is essentially a completed application. In fact, the application could become a non-provisional. It could be filed as a non-provisional, but they'd like to kind of think about it, take that year to kind of think about, well, you know what, do we want to go forward and spend a lot more money? In the meantime, we have this option of holding our place in line. But if you're ready to go, if your application is complete and you really want your protection as soon as possible, you can jump to the non-provisional immediately and just avoid the provisional. Provisional is, like I say, just a cheap place of holding your place in line. The other advantage of a provisional is oftentimes, if you have, business partners and stuff like that, there might be this issue of who invented this application. So there might be a fight over who it is. And if you have the provisional with your name on it as the inventor, that's a very strong objective evidence in a court to say, I invented it because, look, I filed the application. What has the other side done? So, even from that standpoint alone, that's extremely helpful. And I think these days a provisional is like, what, $75 for a micro entity. So that gives you a little bit of peace of mind.
Okay, I think we'll just take this last one and then wrap up. So the best is to be inventor as a person, or the company should own it?
That's kind of bordering on legal advice. The only thing I will say is that if it's owned by a company, the company legally has all the rights to it. So oftentimes the company is the same as you as a person. But the problem is that, let's say you want to sell the company, all right? Well, when you sell the company, the patent's part of that company. And it might not be that easy to get it back in your name. So so in a lot of circumstances, it's easier to give away or give the right to a company rather than to take it back. So that's the only thing I'll say about that.
Well, I think that's a good way to end it. So we are at our time. I would like to thank you, Albert. This has been very informational. Thank you for fielding the questions at the end. And I would like to thank everyone for attending today's webinar. You will receive an email with a link to the recording and the slides. If you would like to sign up for upcoming webinars or access recorded webinars, please visit virginiasbdc.org/training. These resources are designed to be used in collaboration with your local SBDC advisors. You can sign up for a free and confidential session by emailing help@virginiasbdc.org or via our website. We hope to see you at our next session. Take care, everyone.